In October of 1957, the USSR launched the world's first artificial satellite. Its name was Sputnik. Join me as we take a look at the little silver sphere that's kicked off the space race. The year was 1957. It was the high point of an 11-year cycle of sunspot activity, and a proposal was put forth to create a comprehensive series of global geophysical activities. The time frame for these activities would span a period from July of 1957 to December of 1958. It was called the International Geophysical Year, or IGY, and would involve 67 countries and thousands of scientists to collect data on the Earth's surface, core, and atmosphere. It would be in this backdrop of international scientific study that the Soviet Union would shock the world by launching the first artificial satellite, named Sputnik. Shortly after the end of World War II, both superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, began research and development of rockets capable of reaching Earth orbit. This work was built upon rocket technology taken from Nazi Germany after the war. The Soviets had captured a number of German rocket scientists and had sent them to the Soviet Union to work on the Soviet rocket program. As the Germans had experience in the design and building of ballistic missiles, the Soviets would have a similar advantage to the US with their German rocket scientists and would not have to start from ground zero. Work on Soviet rockets began under the leadership of Mikhail Tikhonov. Yeah, I know, I'm slaughtering that name. Tikhonov was deputy chief of the top-secret NII-4 research institution, one of many scientific research institutes within the Soviet Union, undergoing work on the Soviet satellite program. Unfortunately, his team's effort did not find favor within NII-4 and at the Soviet Union's Academy of Artillery Sciences. However, the team persisted, nevertheless. That is, until Tikhonov's work was noticed by Sergei Korolev. Korolev was a rocket designer and eventually became the founder and mastermind during the early days of the Soviet space program. His identity was kept a closely guarded state secret, as was much of the Soviet space program, to protect Korolev from interference from outside agents. The world would not know who was behind the Soviet space program until after his death on January 14, 1966. After the death of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in 1953, his successor, Nikita Khrushchev, was keen to show the world, and the U.S. in particular, the technological superiority of the USSR. With the support of the Soviet Academy of Sciences and a number of Soviet ministers, the satellite program received the green light in 1954. The program further gained support after U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower's announcement in 1955 that the Americans would be sending up a satellite as part of the International Geophysical Year. Then, on January 30, 1956, the Soviet ministry formally approved the project to launch Sputnik into orbit, with Khrushchev's approval following shortly after. Initially, the Soviet team wanted a complex satellite with a variety of instrumentation which would have been very heavy, over a ton in weight. This satellite had the code name of Object D. Korolev was concerned that the weight and complexity would delay the Soviet program from launching before the U.S. could launch its satellite. Thus, he directed his bureau to come up with two simple satellites named Object PS-1 and PS-2, PS standing for the Russian words for Very Simple Satellite. Work on the simple satellites began in February of 1957. Object PS-1, known as Sputnik or Sputnik 1, was circular or spherical in shape, approximately 23 inches in diameter, and weighed about 183 pounds. The two halves of the spherical Sputnik, each 2 millimeters thick, were fastened together with 36 bolts and a rubber seal. The inside of Sputnik was filled with dry nitrogen and contained dual 1-watt radio transmitters powered by 3 silver-zinc batteries. 2 were for the transmitters, the third was for an internal cooling fan. Extending from the satellite at an angle of 70 degrees were 4 whip antennas, 2 of about 8 feet in length, the other 2 were about 9.5 feet long. The transmitters would send out a pulse of radio energy 0.3 of a second in duration and at alternating frequencies between 20.005 MHz and 40.002 MHz. Sputnik 1 was launched on the night of October 4, 1957, at 1928 Greenwich Mean Time, mounted on top of a modified R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. In place of the R-7's usual warhead, Sputnik was mounted in a specially designed nose cone, and shortly after the R-7's engines cut off, the satellite was launched via a pneumatic gas piston and into orbit. It should be noted that people on the ground who claimed to see Sputnik orbiting overhead were actually seeing the R-7 itself, being a bright object in the night sky. Sputnik was tracked on radar as it passed overhead from nation to nation, and its broadcasted beeping could be heard via short radio wave receivers tuned to the correct frequencies, and many on Earth did so. After completing some 1,440 orbits, Sputnik fell back to Earth on January 4, 1958, burning up in the atmosphere. The flight of Sputnik successfully accomplished Khrushchev's goal of showing the world that the USSR was not as technologically behind the West as previously thought. To Western militaries, particularly the US, it demonstrated that the R-7 series of ballistic missiles were significantly more powerful than those in the US. The R-7 could hurl a nuclear weapon at Western nations just as easily as it had put Sputnik into orbit. To the general public, there was a mix of fear and excitement: fear of possible nuclear attack, excitement to the possibilities of space exploration. An immediate reaction to Sputnik in the US was the creation of NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The two superpowers would go on to compete for space first throughout the late 1950s and 1960s in the space race, all started by a beach ball-sized satellite named Sputnik.